Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two Hugh Grant enthusiasts watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question: is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? I'm Diggory Waite, and I'm joined, as always, by my colleague and fellow Hugh Grant obsessive Oscar Beardmore Gray. Oscar, how the bloody hell are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing great, Diggory, because we have tracked down Hugh Grant's first ever film. And it's taken a long time, but we got there in the end.
People at home won't realise how huge a moment this is. So Oscar and I, originally when we planned on doing this podcast, we were like, well, obviously we'll start with his first ever film, a film called Privilege that came out in 1982. You click on it on IMDb, you read a bit more. It's a student film when he was at Oxford University they made. It did come out on BBC. I think someone bought it and they aired it, but like it was resigned to history because it was everyone thought it was a bit crap and it was really low budget and stuff. So it wasn't really that crazy. So we couldn't find it anywhere. And we were thinking about doing like a mini podcast series, like Finding Privileged and like messaging people at the BBC, going through their archives, all that sort of stuff. And then Oscar, how did you find it?
Some great soul posted it on YouTube. It was like, I don't know what was happening. I was just, as you do, trolling through Hugh Grant YouTube. And then I pressed on the tab that said, in the past month, stuff that's been uploaded. And there it was, like a GIF-wrapped present. Yeah. It's only got like 500 views on YouTube at the moment, but people are loving it. And yeah, so if you're listening to this, you can now go and watch Hugh Grant's first ever movie on YouTube, and it hasn't been taken down, and I've downloaded it, so we've got it forever now.
Yeah, we've got it forever. People, get in there in your droves. Right now, like you say, it's nice. It's like 500 people to watch it. There's a lovely little community underneath of like a few commenters, and everyone's being like, isn't this great? La, la, la. Doesn't Hugh look funny? It's lovely. It's a great vibe. But anyway, we're here. Hugh Grant's first ever film. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible, and I can't wait to talk about it, Diggs. Let's have a synopsis from Synopsis Simon to kick us off this episode.
Privileged, directed by Michael Hoffman and released in 1982. Edward Blake, played by Robert Wooley, is one of a group of Oxford undergraduates taking part in a student production of the Duchess of Malfi. During rehearsals of the play, Edward strikes up a romance with fellow actor Anne, played by Diana Catis, and later Lucy, played by Victoria Studd. Whilst Edward tries to keep his relationship with one a secret from the other, he must also make sure his dalliance with Lucy is kept from her boyfriend, Lord Adrian, played by Hughie Grant.
Wicked, wonderful stuff there from Synopsis Simon. So, Oscar, I think important to talk about, maybe more so than any other film he's ever done, talking about the context of this film. Is there anything that you've found out about it? You're like, that's crazy.
Well, the one thing that I did find out about, there's not much about this film as we discussed earlier, but there is this one great quote from Hugh about this film. I think he said it quite a bit later on in his career, but he basically said that the only reason he did this film is because he wanted to have sex with one of the leading ladies. I think he said the first time I was in front of a camera was when I was at Oxford University, and we did a very pretentious student film. I didn't have any goal apart from having sex with a girl called Victoria Studd, who was in the film. It was the only reason that I did it. I mean, that sounds like classic Hugh, doesn't it?
It really, really does. I mean, yeah, apparently he just joined amateur dramatic society there just because, he was bored, he had nothing to do. There was lots of girls in the society. Clearly, Victoria Studd was one of them. She's married to Helena Bonham Carter's brother. Yeah, and she's still out there. She's still active. She's, I think, a TV presenter. So who knows? They could rekindle that love.
I mean, there were certainly a lot of posh toffs, weren't there, on this production, as there were, I'm sure, at Oxford University in the 80s. Like, Helena Bonham Carter somehow gets her name in there somehow. But we had James Wilby also came back up in this film.
James Wilby, woohoo!
He's looking, he looks about 12 in this movie.
Yeah,
it's quite funny. But we've also, who else did we have? We had Mark Williams, who plays Mr. Weasley in Harry Potter. And
Mr. Weasley.
This was his first ever film as well.
It's crazy, isn't it? When I saw that, I was like, hang on, this is mad, because they're two big actors in this film. It's star-studded.
And there was also, I don't know if you realised that Imogen Stubbs was also in this movie, and I think she was one of the sisters in Sense and Sensibility. So she didn't have like a huge career, but she definitely appeared in some stuff afterwards. And also Michael Hoffman, who was the American in this movie. He's actually a director, but he acts in this film too. But he went on to direct Restoration. So there was the link between Hugh. No. They must have met on this movie, and I guess Restoration was 1995, I think. So 13 years later, Hugh got the call from his old mate, Michael Hoffman. And that must have been it.
Yeah, Michael Hoffman, like you say, directed this film. No fool either, because he directed A Midsummer Night's Dream, One Fine Day with George Clooney. So, you think to yourself, he's a serious director. And it's weird, John Schlesinger, which when you look up this film, he's a huge director. He won Best Director for Midnight Cowboy in the 60s. So he's a big deal, and his mark is all over this film. He's not credited, I don't think, as one of the directors, but when you look it up on Wikipedia and IMDb, they say that he was heavily involved in the film. So he clearly took a liking to Hoffman, and they did it there. So again, this film really has so much talent in it. But then that leads me to maybe ask you, Oscar, what were your general thoughts as you went through it?
I thought it was a pretty decent watch. And to put this into context again, I think this might have been the first independent film ever to come out of Oxford University. That's what I read online.
Wow.
I actually thought it was better than quite a few of Hugh Grant's, some of his other films later on in his career. They had some pretty good characters. The main guy, who looks a bit like sort of a posh John Travolta in some ways, I thought he was fairly convincing. And yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a kind of a whodunit film, and I liked it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I thought the exact same thing. I was sitting there thinking, you can tell in many senses that it is a student film, but the fact that it's 10 times more watchable than a lot of the drivel we've seen through Hugh Grant's career in stuff that, has had 10 times the budget with actual professionals behind it, says a whole lot. So you have to watch it anyway if you're a Hugh Grant fan. It's his first ever film. And we haven't even said yet the fact that it was his first film. He's technically... It's not Hugh Grant in it. It's Hughie Grant.
Hughie Grant, yeah.
Cute old Hughie Grant, yeah.
It makes you wonder what Hugh Grant was like at university, because we know it. We don't know a whole lot, but we know there's sort of photos of him at various balls, and if Oxford University has a lot of sort of pretentious balls where people dress up in silly costumes, and in this film there's a bit of that as well, isn't there? And you can kind of imagine Hugh was definitely in those circles.
Yeah, I think like you said with your quote from him, I think he probably joined the dramatic society there for more fun and japes and games and revelry, really. And I guess the acting was at that time a side gig, which I think he says to everyone. I think he's said up to that point his biggest role, as we know, was Brigitte in
Sound of Music.
In Sound of Music, and I think before that, in Alice in Wonderland, he played the bunny, and he had lovely little ears, and he said it was a show-stopping performance. And the interviewer, he was like, I'm sure you've already heard of that, though, because obviously it was that good. So until then, that was all he'd acted in. But I think before we talk more about Hugh Grant's character, because he comes in quite late into the film, doesn't he? So I feel like maybe it's good to talk a little bit about the other characters and a bit more about the other bits in the film to get a feel for it.
Who wants some more? More film chat, film chat. More film chats on the way. Some more film chat with Oscar and Diggory. More film chat, film chat. Today is the day for more film chat, film chat and a Hugh Grant film. Hooray!
Yeah, so I mean, our main man, John Travolta, and John Travolta, otherwise known as Edward. He's a confident lad, and he's clearly the B-knock. He's the big man on campus.
Yeah.
He's been in a few productions before, and he has a thing with this lady who won't tell him her name at a party, and then they're going to find out who's in the play, and it turns out she's the leading lady alongside him. And then they sort of go through this various rehearsals and stuff, and then another leading lady kind of joins the fray, who happens to be Hugh Grant's girlfriend. Diggs, what did you make of Edward and the other ladies who were leading this film?
Well, it's interesting. So yeah, like what I remember the beginning of this film. It starts with one of those parties that you talked about before, and this guy Edward is there, and this girl, and she's wearing this mask, and it's all really quite sexy. You have to say, it really is. And he's like, "Take off your mask," and she's like, "No." And he's like, "What's your name?" And she says, "Cat." And he's like, "That's not a name. That's the name of an animal." And so it's all quite sexy and saucy. And then everyone piles back to his place. It's all good. Everyone leaves except for them.
Night, night. Good night. Night. Bye.
Drive safely, Imogen. Well, where were we?
But what I didn't like about this film, and maybe where the film shows its age a bit, is the fact that it wasn't great. He was like, "Stay," and she was like, "No," and he was like, "I'm serious, stay."
Yeah,
and it's all
I'm
a bit like,
force you to stay.
Look, you asked me back for a chat and a drink. Well, we've had a chat and a drink. So how do I get out of here?
It'd be much simpler if you stayed.
I don't want to stay.
I'm not used to girls running out on me in the middle of the night.
For you. My heart goes out to you.
Good.
Look, it's late and I have to get up in the morning and I have to work. So, my clue, please. Why, you bastard. Thanks for the drink.
That already put me on a weird vibe. So park that, remember that, because basically Edward is the original fuckboy. These are absolutely...
Forget Love Island.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about right here. Forget Geordie Shore, all that. He is a complete fuckboy because, yeah, he's like chirping this girl, and when they start rehearsing together, he's keeping it going, trying to chirp her. Eventually, he meets Hugh Grant and Hugh Grant's girlfriend, and he starts this illicit affair with Hugh Grant's girlfriend. The original girl he was trying to get with sort of cottons onto this. It's sort of like a woman's intuition, where she's like, she doesn't necessarily know there's someone else, but she can sense something.
Sense it.
Exactly. And so then she tries to start wooing him again, Edward again. And which is what's annoying about this, because you're like, well, this guy is a complete knob who has no regard for morals and is really like been a bit weird and non-consensual with you already, and now you want to seduce him. It's annoying. And so it creates this big old tangle. So in amongst all that, a guy keeps sending Anne roses, and that guy is James Wilby. Who,
poor James.
I know, poor James. If Edward is the original fuckboy, then James Wilby is unfortunately the original simp. And he keeps inviting Anne out for drinks and stuff, and she keeps being like, "No, I'm busy." And then for the same evening, we'll try and invite out Edward. And it's very
James Wilby has a serious glow up in Morris, doesn't he, compared to this?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, he like you said, he looks about 12 years old in this film. And also, to be honest, what's quite nice is actually he's showing his acting chops, because in this film he plays a bit of a. I feel like he plays a bit of a doofus and a bit of a Dumbo, like a bit clueless and a bit like, "Oh, hey." Whereas in Morris, he's a lot more like, he's showing
he's
his
with it, yeah. He's
and reserved and and intelligent and well spoken and stuff. So that's quite nice to see the difference. But maybe let's talk about James Wilby for a second, just because obviously, does this not work so well for the universe? Again, is this not a prequel to Morris?
It does work extremely well. I mean, Hugh must have first met James at Oxford, and it's just a shame that he won't tell us more by coming on the podcast, because we have sent him emails, which he hasn't responded to. So, James, if you're listening to us, come on down.
Come on down. We'd love to have you on and talk more.
Talk privilege with us. Like, I don't think there's ever been a podcast about privilege. There can't have been.
Yeah, because no one could bloody find the film until now. But the film is... Yeah, it's basically all about this love affair. So maybe that's a good time, because now you know how entangled it is and how there's all these crossed thorns and entangled roots. Hugh Grant starts to play a role.
Hughie Grant.
You're right. Hughie Grant starts to play a role.
Well, I'm taking you. I'm taking you for granted. Well, I'm taking you. Well, I'm taking you for granted.
So we got to talk Hugh Grant's first ever moment on screen. What do you make of it?
You're going to have to remind me, because genuinely, I can't even remember what the first moment was.
Well, he's like coming out of the water with some like deer on his back.
I completely missed that. Which is absolutely insane, because he references it in the next bit. Can you see his face though? Isn't it at night?
You can't really see his face, but you can see his hair.
Ah.
His hair's a dead giveaway.
Mate.
We already know this, but Hugh, he's probably, I think he's about 22 in this film, and he's just got fantastic hair. And the first moment he's ever on screen, it's really weird. I don't really understand why. Edward is like by the river at night, and Hugh just has literally a deer on his back, which he's killed, and blood all over his hands. You're like, what the hell? This come out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
Afterwards, like, he explains in the next scene that, like,
I was to kill it by cutting its throat, and then I was to carry it across the river, and then cut out its heart and burn the remains in the flames. Of course, the college knew I'd do it from the first day I came here, because my grandfather had done it, and my great-grandfather. We give the college a great deal of money, and they agree to punish us for our frivolity.
You mean they're going to send you down?
Of course, it's part of the agreement.
And you don't mind leaving?
He doesn't intend to.
My father gave me this house. That's part of the agreement, too.
as expected, Hugh's a massive posho. I mean, it's easy to see how someone like David Cameron might have... What was he said to have done with the pig?
Listen, if we'd have to bleep it out, we're not allowed to say.
But yes, it seems to me at Oxford and Cambridge University, there's a certain amount of ritual that seems to be passed down the ages, such as killing deer, dragging it through campus.
Yeah, or putting your knob in a pig. All manners of bestiality. It's not good news. One thing I will say as well is that this also started an incredibly consistent thread throughout his early works, which is just lots of sex. Lots of sex. I mean, a bit of romance here and there, but mostly it's just a very, very... His early career is just a sexy, saucy, fun ride. And it's just interesting to see that, this first film, lots of kissing and sexiness, and it's just like he started very much how he meant to go on, right up until I'd probably say about Four Weddings and a Funeral. It feels like sex was bubbling under each of his films. Even films like The Lair of the White Worm, which might even be the sexiest one. There's loads of weird shit in that.
Well, I mean, if there's ever a reason to watch the movie, that's it. I mean, I think also Hugh, just also another thing, in pretty much his first, I don't know, maybe 10 movies, he is a lord. He's a lord.
He's Lord Adrian in this, isn't he? Yeah.
Morris, Lair of the White Worm.
Yeah.
He may as well be in Four Weddings. I don't know.
Yeah. No, exactly. I saw someone speaking about this film online and they were like, I haven't been able to track Privilege down, but apparently he plays a student from Oxford who's actually also a lord. I guess it's hard to imagine him as that, lol. And it's like, yeah, they're absolutely right. Like, that could be pretty much every film he's in for the early part of his career. They're absolutely spot on.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted. Oh, the podcast show.
So, as I said, Edward starts this illicit affair with Hugh Grant's girlfriend. Edward and Hugh Grant's girlfriend are kissing in a closet. Hugh Grant happens to walk by and goes, maybe I'll look in here. Opens the door, and there is perhaps the longest and most awkward pause in the world. And then Edward is like, Hugh, he's like, It just slaps him around the face. It's the most beautiful slap in the world. Scenes like that, though, what did you think about his character? Because I think those moments really show off what his character's like.
Yeah, he's a bit wet, isn't he? He's a bit.
Yeah.
He seems like quite like anxious, paranoid, insecure, unsure of himself. Like he gives me this sense that he's this like posh, privileged, I guess, privileged being the name guy who doesn't really fit in to the sort of crowd that he's in, but is trying his very best, but is very insecure of himself. And he just sort of has this like almost like show girlfriend who doesn't really like him that much, and they pretend they're kind of like in love, but actually they're not. And then like his kind of reaction to her kissing him was a little bit weird, where he was just like, Lucy. And then he kind of goes into this like weird trance, doesn't he? It was strange.
So there's another one of these mad parties, and Hughie Grant finds a gun. And a couple of guns, I think.
Out of
nowhere. And then he goes up to Edward and he's like, right, mate.
You're a coward!
I want a duel.
Coward! Please take one. Thank you, honestly. I just wouldn't know what to do with it.
Hughie Grant's girlfriend
Lucy.
is like...
Just leave it alone, Adrian. Just piss off.
Hughie storms off. Everyone rushes outside. And he's blown his bloody brains out.
Yeah, it was really unexpected. Like, I mean, it's not the first time Hugh's had his brains blown out, but I didn't expect this in his first ever film.
Yeah.
And it is kind of weird because, like, Edward, like, just kind of goes up to him and, like, just sort of, he's like, oh, Hugh's dead. Too bad.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I feel like this was where it really did get that like sort of student film feel.
Yeah.
Where they don't really have the special effects to see Hugh's actual brains being blown up. So you just hear a sound of a gun and then you see red face paint all over him. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
he must be dead then.
Yeah. And also, it's just a thing where they're like, right, we need something mental to happen, but we're not going to build up to it or have anything around it. We're just going to have it happen. And then
everyone will react and then, yeah, the film will end.
Well, it's annoying, though, for the universe because obviously, you know, we want to link it to Morris and it be a prequel to Morris, but you can't really do that when Hugh Grant's dead. It's quite annoying.
We want him to turn into Clive Durham all of a second.
Exactly.
Yeah, like 10 years later, Hughie Grant has a little moustache and he lives in this massive mansion. But yeah, he's dead, unfortunately.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
So, Diggs, we've already got to the end of this episode. Hugh Grant's first ever movie, Privileged.
Yeah.
Are we taking Hugh for granted?
I can't believe we're here. Honestly, I want people to really realise this is mad that we've just watched this film. We've talked about it. I'm so glad that we've done that. I'm really struggling with this, Oscar. It was getting to the end of the film and I was thinking, what am I going to say here? Because, like we said earlier, like this is much more watchable than a lot of the films we've watched. What I think has happened is, and people might hate this, I'm starting to think that the more of these films we've watched, the more the bar has lowered. I'm worrying that actually, this is quite worrying, and a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this. I'm actually worried that I'm discovering an unfortunate trend in Hugh Grant's films in that actually a lot of them aren't great. And and actually, the bar is quite low for him not to be taking you for granted. So I'm going to say, it really pains me to say it, because it's his first film, even if it is a student film, it's great fun. His hair's fantastic. I'll tell you what, his acting and his feeble acting is fabulous, and he's really fun. It's really great. However, he's not in the film enough. The film isn't really amazing, and it doesn't have enough for me to really sink my teeth into. So I'm going to say Hugh Grant's first film has been taking Hugh for granted. But what about you?
I'm pretty shocked, to be honest, Diggs. It seems like you're betraying us.
I know. And I think I'm worried that I'm going to get strung up for this.
You're a traitor.
Yeah.
There's a traitor in our midst. I think I'm going to say we are not taking Hugh for granted, Diggs.
Yes, dude.
I think what you said at the beginning is bang on. Like, we are just blessed to be here. We're blessed to be watching this film and even having the chance to review it. I don't think there's going to be many people post 1985 who've seen this movie. So I think we have to acknowledge the fact that it was a student production, and for a student production in 1982 to be watching it now 30 years later, pretty much, and still be thinking that wasn't bad. And I thought there was a lot of like actually quite sort of fun like 1980s-y stuff in this movie. Like, for example, like I thought their discos and parties looked pretty fun. Like, you know, they had like kind of like the Jam and the Dire Straits were like in full force. I could kind of imagine that, and like everyone was wearing cool stuff. That looked pretty fun, and like, you know, just student life in the 80s. It looked like a fun time. And I think they portrayed that quite well. While Hugh, yes, he wasn't in the film enough, and he was only really here just getting his foot in the door. We've got to look at this and view it as a piece of history and a real cinematic find for us. And yeah, I don't think we can say anything but we're not taking Hugh for granted.
I think that's more fair than my assessment. How can we have taken Hugh for granted when this was the show, this was the film, this was the production that gave him his first break, where those agents saw him from that? I think you're absolutely right.
I think the problem is, Diggs, that I think maybe you're more of a pure film critic with your, you know, film critic hat on, looking at the sort of, you know, the makeup and the structure of the film, whereas I'm more of a gut. I've gone with my gut here on the actual the significance of the movie. The significance could be no greater when it's his first. But I think that I think that's a fair enough assessment. If you're going on film critic versus significance, to meet somewhere in the middle is probably balanced for privileged. Absolutely. But there you have it. There you have it. Yeah, absolute joy to talk to you about this one, Diggs. And it's just a shame we're not going to be able to do the podcast series Finding Privileged. But yes. Yeah, and to be honest, like, we kind of, I guess, just to add on, like, we kind of expected in some of these lesser films or shit films, maybe, like An Awfully Shite Adventure. Yeah. So our audience kind of, you know, kind of tapering off a little bit. But to be quite honest, the fans have stuck with us through these films, so we massively appreciate it. And like, we still get messages on Instagram. Like, like a couple of days ago, we had this great message about the Bengali Night, didn't we? Yes. Oh, one of our fans said that her family's estate was where the Bengali Night was filmed, which is epic. Like, that is just amazing. Those crazy tangential connections to Hugh is what we love. I'm so jealous. That's like such a direct link to Hugh Grant. Yeah. And all I've got is this bloody podcast. You know, why can't I have a family estate that he, you know, I don't know, filmed Paddington 2 in? So, Diggs, why don't we, at some point, we're going to go to India together, and we're going to go on a private tour of this estate, and then we're going to do a vlog. Hugh Grant was here in 1989 filming the Bengali Night. He turned around this corner and he looked all rugged and he was covered in oil, and that was probably the sexiest he's ever looked, and it was there, right there on that street corner there. God, that was a shite film. That was the highlight, though. He looked like Aragorn or something from Lord of the Rings. He was so rugged. You don't think of Hugh Grant as rugged. No, you don't. You don't. I mean, but he was there. It's about as close as he got to the cannibal Hugh in the Cloud Atlas. Oh, the less said about that, the better. My word. Right, gang. As I say, follow us on the socials. Look up Taking Hugh for Granted on Twitter. At Taking Hugh. Yes, look up Taking Hugh for Granted on Facebook and Instagram. Keep sending us those lovely messages. We're loving it. We're loving you. Oscar, until next time. See you, buddy. Bye. Bye.
Taking Hugh for Granted is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray. The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.